One of the best actors of the 1980s, Debra Winger could light up any screen with an expressive look, a passionate gesture, or a sincere statement. She was likened to greats like Jane Fonda and Meryl Streep, and in just 3 years she garnered 2 Oscar nods for Officer and Gentleman in terms of endearment. Has won over the hearts of important filmmakers all over the world. Still, she disappeared almost entirely a little over a decade later. No major controversy, no public humiliation, and no catastrophic part. Hollywood was resonating with a single unsaid reality. Debra Winger was no longer sought after for collaboration. She remained silent for a long time after being called difficult, haughty, and unmanageable. Provide no explanations. No compromises, no interviews to fix one's image. The reality, however, is never straightforward in Hollywood. There is a story behind every criticism. There is still a lingering wound behind every distant look. Debra Winger's insults would have hurt anyone equally, and they were always there when she spoke out. Here we'll take a look at the connections that made or broke Debra Winger's career. Her tormentors on set, her bosses who sought to censor her producers who wrote her off, and the friendships that never materialized. A defiant actress is not the protagonist of this narrative. John Travolta stars as a woman whose fear of rejection leads her from love to a devastating slap in a society that idolizes those who say yes. When Debra Winger first came to Hollywood's attention in 1980, it wasn't only for her role in Urban Cowboy. Additionally, it was her first encounter with a passionate but equally unstable relationship. John Travolta, who was just off Saturday Night Fever, was her co-star and a promising actor who was affable and unpredictable while simultaneously appealing and rebellious. Winger felt uneasy about their initial encounter. Neither a hello nor a simple congratulations were offered by Travolta at the outset. Rather, he inquired as to her Jewish identity, and then promptly followed up by inquiring as to whether or not she had attended university. A subliminal prejudice, an evaluation based on looks, education, and background lurked in those seemingly innocuous queries, according to Winger. In the end, he made a sexually suggestive comment that she has since denied ever making. But even in the midst of that first friction, something continued to spark, as if cinema were intrinsically drawn to anarchy. Their paths crossed. They played the role of an angry, passionate couple on film. Behind the scenes, they started a true, steamy, poisonous relationship. A typical filmic fake hit is Travolta being told to slap Winger's character in one romantic scene. He actually smacked her as the cameras were rolling. It was so forceful that it fractured a tooth. Nothing but suffering, no apologies, no pausing to see how she was doing. Psychological, physical, and, in an unexpected turn of events following the slap, Travolta proposed to her. No, Debra Winger said. Not a single dramatic scene or long explanation. A gut reaction after understanding the relationship had shifted from passionate to domineering and controlling. She just said no. She ended their twisted romance and walked away from him. Her career would be marred by the wounds inflicted by that first significant relationship. Years later, when questioned about Travolta, her reaction was neutral. Hollywood never allows anyone the chance to really recover from the hurt they've endured. All they have is quiet, the type that comes from someone who has loved, trusted, and been hurt before. An Officer and a Gentleman, starring Richard Gere, The Unbreakable Brick Wall, was one of Debra Winger's crowning artistic triumphs. She was nominated for an Oscar and lauded by critics for her sincere portrayal of the incident, although she herself put it frankly. Richard Gere, her co-star, was a wall to Winger despite what the audience perceived him as a lovely, reticent, and soulful guy. That was no laughing matter. For a long time, it represented the estrangement and intransigence felt by two characters who, despite portraying a legendary romantic relationship on screen, were unable to connect with one another outside of the spotlight. The actor who played the strict drill instructor, Louis Gossett Jr., revealed in his autobiography that Winger and Gere shied away from one another when the cameras weren't running. Ignoring dialogue. Complete lack of communication. Not the slightest bit of warmth. No one ever heard Richard Gere deny it. He acknowledged that there was friction between them in an interview, but he did not elaborate. In contrast, Winger was much more forthright. She admitted to the Daily Mail that she was irritated due to her own acting anxieties and would often take it out on her co-stars, particularly Gere. It wasn't just a personal dispute, though. Behind the camera was where Winger felt the most pain. She told The Telegraph that she felt like trash in an interview with Don Simpson, the producer, and filmmaker Taylor Hackford. Simpson, who was notorious for his sexist remarks, once made the inexcusable statement that Winger wasn't affable, which was shocking even for Hollywood in the 1980s. It went on from there. The directors said that Winger's face appeared swollen on screen, so they urged her to take diuretics on particular days. These were not suggestions from doctors. It all started with the men in the editing room, the ones who thought it was their right to treat a woman's body like a prop. Winger refused to back down, despite her intense anger. A sequence that she felt compromised her character was the one she objected to. The shooting stopped abruptly. After seeing the film, Taylor Hackford had to concede that Winger was completely correct from an acting perspective, despite his initial anger. Being correct doesn't always lead to forgiveness in Hollywood, particularly for women. When a male actor stops filming because he is unhappy with the results, it's because he is a perfectionist. As soon as Winger did it, she was characterized as problematic, difficult, and unmanageable. Simpson, Don, and Hackford, Taylor. Tensions with co-stars like Richard Gere may have been icy, quiet, and tinged with silence when the producer takes on the role of the bully with Debra Winger. Much more embarrassing, though, was what transpired behind the scenes, particularly involving producer Don Simpson and director Taylor Hackford. A gradual loss of respect that ate away to her sense of value on a daily basis. Winger was more than simply an actress demonstrating her abilities on the set of An Officer and a Gentleman. The guys in her male-dominated system made no secret of their desire to control her in any way, shape, or form, and she was a young lady trying to find her way. The strong yet inflexible director Taylor Hackford was once sarcastically called an animal by Winger. The tone was non-insulting. It was the instinctive reaction of someone who has been cornered too often. The film's emotional core, Winger stated she was often treated like a second-rate performance. The most serious injuries, however, did not occur while the camera was rolling. They emerged from the editing suite. Don Simpson, a notoriously nasty, obsessive, and dominating producer, is the object of widespread ridicule. Declared Debra Winger wasn't charismatic enough to play the lead role in front of the whole crew at one point. A terrifying slight entwined with the objectification and misogyny that have long afflicted the field. And that was just the beginning. Reviewing the tape after each day of filming, Simpson would determine that her face appeared swollen. Her doctor prescribed diuretics. Do not visit a physician. Ignoring the importance of her comfort. She had to take medication if she felt her on-screen beauty was lacking. There was no muteness from Debra Winger. The woman resisted. It would have been common practice for male performers of the day to oppose shooting a sequence that, in her opinion, grossly distorted the character's mental state, but she chose not to. Winger, on the other hand, was branded as difficult and troublesome and confined to her own picture as a result. The production delay infuriated director Hackford. In the end, though, he had to concede that she was correct, not only emotionally, but architecturally and psychologically in her assessment after reevaluating the scene and her arguments. Still, there was a subtle caution rather than an apology with that admission. You won't have much success controlling her. Plus, an unruly female is the most dangerous thing that can happen in Hollywood. Winger parted ways with Hackford and Simpson following that film. She kept mum about them most of the time in interviews, but when pressed, her silence seemed like an accusation. I am still cognizant of it. The decision to not relive it has been mine. Lady Madonna. Different league, different route. An emotionally wrenching biopic about World War II female baseball players, A League of Their Own, had Debra Winger as its leading lady in the early 1990s. She had strong convictions about the project. In order to embody an athlete, she trained for 3 months straight with the Chicago Cubs, increasing her physical endurance and learning the sport's techniques. Winger saw this as more than simply another part. It was a profound dedication to acting, women, and history. And then Madonna showed up. The news that the internationally renowned pop singer would be joining the cast did not infuriate Winger. She remained silent. None of the producers or directors received her phone call expressing her dissatisfaction. But she did do one thing. She got up and left. Quite simply. In a rash. Absent any justification. She informed the media afterwards that she had no interest in being in that type of picture. Winger never once attacked Madonna directly, But when questioned about the film's pop stars, she said one frigid comment that Hollywood insiders understood precisely. The body of Madonna's filmography speaks volumes, in my opinion. Aside from someone has lost all patience for creative compromise, no drama, no animosity, simply a sigh. Winger left the film not because she was proud or envious. She knew, so she walked away. If you're not passionate about a project, it doesn't mean it deserves your best effort or honesty. She was succeeded by Gina Davis, who acted like a skilled craftsperson who, faced with low-quality materials, opts not to start. The picture was an enormous hit and is now considered a classic of American pop culture. However, Winger did not feel any remorse because, in her view, an actor's absence can be the consummating act of their craft. Marilyn Monroe. A conflict with no end in sight. Shirley MacLaine, the woman Debra Winger referred to as Mother on television but never once considered a colleague in real life, was the most strained relationship Debra Winger had ever experienced. They were both nominated for Best Actress for their performances as mother and daughter in the 1983 Oscar-winning picture Terms of Endearment. The picture also won Best Picture. Despite the film's heartwarming message about motherly love, the set was a still battlefield where the two strong-willed women fought with each shot, gaze, and interruption. With 3 Oscar nominations under her belt, MacLaine exuded the poised elegance of classic Hollywood when they first crossed paths on set. She wore a fur coat and a beautiful dress. On the other hand, Winger arrived with a rebellious expression, a short skirt, and combat boots. Seeing her made MacLaine realize, oh my God, it wasn't a judgment, a confession she would later make in her biography. It sounded like the innate warning of a bygone period. James L. Brooks, the film's director, had to admit it from the beginning. Even they were confused about their connection. When Winger, who was notoriously aggressive and impetuous, scolded MacLaine during a take because she was off target, the tension reached its highest point. Get it right. I know what hitting a mark means, MacLaine shouted back, a man who isn't easily rattled. At that point, Winger got up, shifted her skirt ever so slightly, peered over Shirley MacLaine's shoulder, and farted in her face. In her autobiography, My Lucky Stars, MacLaine subsequently detailed this incident. Winger was not disputing it. During an interview with Andy Cohen in 2018, she seemed to smile slightly and said that there was some truth to the rumor about farting and licking feet. They were not at odds with one another. They fought like savage beasts confined in a cage, with only one likely to survive, at least physically. I deserve this was MacLaine's now iconic opening statement after she accepted her Academy Award. Winger wasn't the intended target. However, its shadow's identity was known to everyone in the room. Winger clarified afterwards that they had not had lunch. The type of respect that fighters exchange after a difficult bout was present, though. Even though you're aware of your opponent's lethal actions, you'd rather not face them again. Even though it's been almost 40 years, people still can't seem to forget about it. Interview programs continue to inquire. The media continues to bring it back. Winger merely smirks each time, allowing others to reimagine the story as they see fit, because wounds from some fights, whether won or lost, never go away. John Malkovich, an actor who poses as a fashion model. By the late 1980s, Debra Winger had collaborated with a wide spectrum of co-stars, including physically violent partners, emotionally unstable screen moms, and charming but toxic co-stars. John Malkovich, whom she casually called a runway model, was a new type of collaborator she discovered in 1990 while filming The Sheltering Sky. Winger said it best. He looked like he was performing himself, not the character. This had nothing to do with his good looks or his flashy wardrobe. That, to Winger, was the worst possible offense. Malkovich, with his icy stare, abstract approach, and speech pattern that resembled narrating an internal monologue, was entirely unrecognizable to her since she believed in genuine, unrehearsed feeling and acting from the heart, and in the solid bond between two individuals in a shared frame. Rather than a scene partner, she saw an impersonal, well-designed display in every scenario. She was always honest about how she felt, nothing evasive or metaphorical. She was very forthright in an interview about her experience working with Malkovich. He resembled a model on a catwalk. He was a ballet dancer. I didn't know who I was speaking with, but his face was stunning. Some speculated that Winger's outburst was motivated by jealousy at her co-star for ignoring her. It was expected by those who had collaborated with her. False pretenses revolted her. She did not approve of shows that were more concerned with pleasing the audience than with being true to the characters. The Sheltering Sky, directed by Bernardo Bertolucci with meticulous attention to detail and filled with philosophical profundity and eerie Moroccan vistas, was, in Winger's opinion, a hollow experience. Not because of the acting or the direction, but because the guy she worked with every day avoided making eye contact. Winger never collaborated with Malkovich again after that project, and she never spoke ill of him afterwards. Like the unapproachable acting style she could never warm up to, he remained a hazy speck in her mind. Over the course of her 20-year Hollywood career, Debra Winger was undeniably charismatic, famous, and talented. She was beloved by her audience for her unvarnished honesty, and she had classic roles and Oscar nominations. Additionally, she possessed an ego, intellect, and refusal to comply, qualities that were never seen in women in Hollywood. Individualism and creative vision are terms that describe guys with these traits. Winger found them to be challenging, impossible, and even dangerous. When Winger declined to film a sequence because she was unhappy, director James Bridges paused filming, as he confessed in an interview. Upon more reflection, though, he was compelled to admit that she was entirely correct. In order to sabotage, Winger did not rebel. She would not remain mute in the face of male dominance, character fabrication, or distortion of the truth involving an actor. They would label a male actor a perfectionist if he performed my work, she remarked at one point. Who am I, though? Trouble was I? Women are not forgiven in such a manner in Hollywood. It has no mercy on actors who refuse to submit to directors who refuse to cast them in parts they don't feel emotionally invested in, who speak the truth about male celebrities who are too glamorized, and Winger was well aware of this. She turned to her husband in an open field in Ireland in 1995 and spoke the simple phrase, "I'm done." That was it. I am not sorry. Everything is calm. The retirement will not be announced at a news conference. As soon as she realized the roles being offered were nothing more than recycled versions of her previous work, she just walked away. There are no longer any obstacles, no grounds for open discussion, and no justification for continuing to endure it. Leaving was her decision. Having a family, being a wife, and taking life as it comes. Instead of walking the red carpet, go for smaller stages. Debra Winger was not a horrible Hollywood girl. She merely lived artistically rather than for art. She refrained from destroying sets, fighting addiction, or using the press to create rumors. She was simply never taught the proper way to bend her head. Perhaps that is why Hollywood, which often casts submissive female leads, was at a loss for how to handle her. Perhaps that's why her memory will live on forever. It was not because of her failure that Debra Winger vanished. It was the act of selecting itself that Hollywood would never forgive her for, as she left while still at the top, with choices and the ability to say no. Others were not pleased with her. She refused to conform to the mold that the male directors had already drawn up. She was not hesitant to anger her co-stars. She wasn't trying to play a sensitive character for the sake of her next role. She would not budge. That was her biggest transgression in a field where obedience is paramount. There was a fight. Debra Winger got hurt, and then she was shoved aside. Although she was never betrayed by anyone. Possibly more valuable than 3 Oscars is that many young actors are now speaking out against unfairness, the pressure to be silent, and the control over their image and dignity, and the world is now starting to get it. Long ago, before the rise of social media, alliances, and hashtag campaigns, Winger fought the battle alone. The one thing she possessed was an unquenchable voice. Just in case you ever wanted to know why Debra Winger was never well-liked by Hollywood, here it is. Did she dare to speak what others were scared to say? Or was she just too difficult? You, on the other hand? Who would you go with if you were Debra Winger and faced with the choice between fame and freedom? Leave a comment with your ideas. Be sure to use the follow button to ensure you don't miss the next story if this one made you think. Courageous spirit we reveal to the world.